My name's Steve, and I'm from Moser Associates, and I have an associate in the back there called Felix from our Berlin office. But very brief introduction. We're not all architects. We're designers and architects and contractors as well. We design and build only one thing, and that's workplaces. That's all we do. We don't do hospitals or cafes or residential or anything, just workplaces. So it's a bit of a niche. We do quite well at it. We've been doing it for 44 years, not me personally, but as a business. We do it all over the world. So I was going to say that now you've heard from a scientist, you've heard from a tech provider, you've heard from the building owner. Now you're going to hear from what I was going to say is a nerdy architect. But I'm not as nerdy as some of the people in this room. I realize on the Richter scale of nerds, I'm down at like a light tremor. I didn't realize I was in an earthquake zone. But I'll do my best. So what I'm going to do is just give you a background, 2 steps back, and a vision from where, I'm going to say where we see it. It's actually where I see it, but I'm hoping to spread the word in our business. This is where we see the technological sort of interventions that have been talked about very eloquently, and you can see them here, bGrid, all of that malarkey. This is where I'm coming from. It's not directly connected to bGrid because they didn't pay me enough. Okay, I'm going to set a theme, and the theme for me and you hopefully is that we are in an age of uncertainty. You could say that's a general condition, and maybe it is, but it's certainly for us the age of uncertainty in the workplace zone, and I'll try and explain why. This is a phrase, I didn't make it up. I think Ken Galbraith, the economist, came up with this one back in the 70s, before most of you were born, I suspect, and his hypothesis was that, well, it's a theory, really, not a hypothesis, was that, the industrialized nations have been going along swimmingly until it went wrong. And he said, look, we're in an age now when we can see it's gone wrong. It doesn't work. He was a little bit left-wing, I think it's fair to say. Margaret Thatcher hated him, tried to block his TV program, didn't read his books, all that stuff. And the interesting thing is, I don't think it was Galbraith, but somebody pointed out the Titanic was a really good icon for the age of uncertainty back in the last century, because up until that point, everything had been going really well, and nothing kind of went wrong. Colonialism made the industrialized nations very rich. Industry worked, you made stuff, you sold it, you got wealthy. And they built the Titanic, the pinnacle of all the stuff that people wanted to do, travel, luxury, spend lots of money, until they realized that there were some things that they couldn't control, and we know what happened next. Andrew Bailey, governor of the Bank of England, 2 days ago said, he apologized, he said, our predictions, our predictive models aren't working as well as they should. Well, I think when Andrew Bailey says that, we should all quake in our boots. So that's the hypothesis or theory that I want to put forward. There are 2 things that our clients are reacting to. They don't quite put it like this, but when you listen to lots and lots of clients, there are 2 things that they're trying to work out, and this is where uncertainty comes in. First one is the climate crisis. It affects everybody, unless you're Donald Trump. And what they say is, we don't know what this looks like. We don't know how to react to this. It's a really dangerous time. And of course, it is. So that's one thing. They're all having to respond to this by things that, I've talked about briefly, but you've got to save energy, you've got to decarbonize, and you've got to vote for policies that help you do that. The other thing is changing working patterns. Now, this isn't new. People have been working remotely and from home for donkeys, but what happened during the pandemic was that we got really used to this idea, and it made people question the very purpose of a workplace. Why bother? Why do you go to it? Why can't you just work at home or in Starbucks all the time? And it made people ask, what's it doing? What do people want to do when they go to a workplace? Will they be productive working remotely? Or, there's lots of myths around this. Will it make them happier? How do I keep the business culture together if people don't go to the office? Et cetera, et cetera. Big questions. I mean, like 1,000 questions that arose from this big drift. Hasn't happened before. And the reason that people can do it is because of technology, because there is an environment that enables you to connect and speak to your mates and do work, change or decide on your working hours. We know what that looks like. I just wanted to go through a really so looking at solutions, those are the two problems. Looking at solutions, everybody wants to know what to do. That's the solution, right? And that's the bit that you need, that's the bit that you pay for, that's the bit you buy. And with technology, you can get data to inform that solution. But data's useless. It's like one of those little bags of Scrabble tiles. Until you've analyzed it and done something useful with it, it's meaningless. Data is just a cost, actually. We've got lots of it, in fact, much more than we will ever use. So what you have to do with data, of course, is you have to analyze it. That analysis is a word that we can talk about, but it's a verb, and it means do something sensible with data so you can get here. This doesn't work in reverse, by the way. It only goes that way. Once you've analyzed data, you might get some findings and say, well, that's interesting. I need to do X, or it would be more profitable if I did Y. So then you do something about it. So data doesn't do anything for you until you've analyzed it. So that's the brains bit. And then hopefully with the insights, you may say that just keep it going as it is, do nothing. There's always a do nothing option, but usually it means you do something different. So I just wanted to bring that up as a chain, because in terms of data, that's the delivery chain, the supply chain for getting action. I think looking at it, we tried to make more of these, but there seem to be three, handy isn't it, three, it's always three. There seem to be three areas where technology can contribute to our clients' well-being, if we're talking about a client who's commissioning a workplace. Sustainability, we know what that is. Workplace design, I'll come on to that in a minute, but as designers, we're kind of interested that technology might help us in that. And user experience, which means, what's it like to operate in a place? Is it easy? Is it fun? Does it make you happy? And this is one of the contexts for data and the technology that we're talking about. Because I've spoken to some of the people in this room about this. The thing about technology is, and this is difficult for an architect and for a designer and people that deal in the visual world, it's invisible. It's a real bugger, that. You can't take a photograph of it, so it's actually quite difficult to promote. You can see the spin-offs, you can see the proxies, you can see some of the kit, like screens and laptops and microphones, but that's not technology. Technology is actually invisible, but it's very powerful, but you can't take a photograph of it. And that's the context that we're up against. I call it dark energy because, of course, if you believe astrophysicists, they'll tell you that the larger part of the universe consists of dark matter. And dark energy is the reason that the universe is still expanding when it should have gotten over that and started contracting again. So it's there, it's a fact, it drives the biggest things in the universe, but you can't see it. You can't crank up a telescope in the Atacama Desert and take a picture of dark energy. So if we're comfortable with that, let's go to the three areas that I was talking about earlier. That's sustainability, workplace design, and work experience. Sustainability is the easy one, because actually I was going to say, if you think that the climate crisis is an issue, well, this doesn't matter anymore because it's a legal responsibility. It's not anymore just an ethical thing. You have to come up with some answers to this now. because of either the EU directives or in the UK, the Companies Act, ESOS. If you're in the States, you probably get off a bit lighter, but that might change. They are planning, by the way, to legislate federally in the States for sustainable action. What's interesting is that there are lots of spin-offs from this, because if you behave sustainably as a company, and if you can demonstrate that, if it's visible, then people like to buy from you, people like to work for you. It makes you save money. Everybody wants to save money, and you comply with what people rather loosely call ESG compliance, regulations. We're talking about the E bit of the ESG, by the way, and other disclosure directives. So, you can't get away from this. So it's what we call low-hanging fruit, which means we need to help people behave sustainably. So whatever else you do, even if you don't want it, you've got to do that. And for that, you need data, which is, and the sort of data you'll collect here will obviously be things about not just environmental conditions, like you don't want to heat a room when no one's in it. You don't want to light a room when no one's in it. You don't want mechanical kit to run when it's not needed. So the data that you collect on environmental conditions and the control systems that drive them, there's a lot you can do. We've heard already today that you save money by not doing things when they're not needed. That's using data and putting it back into the system in a feedback loop. This should be a no-brainer. But it's not only about compliance, it's not only about saving money, it also makes people quite a lot happier. Next one is physical workspace. This is my comfort zone here. This is where we've been in our business for donkeys. We design workplaces. Now, what's interesting there is that buildings and workplaces have a fantastic amount of loose fit, which means they're there, and people don't get grumpy when there's only 2 people in a 20-person meeting room. Well, occasionally they do, but they kind of understand it, because if the space is there, you might as well use it. There's usually no one around in a building in a normal office at sort of 1 o'clock in the morning, unless they're having sex in the toilet. And the bottom line is the loose fit we've tolerated for ever since people put buildings up. It's the same residentially, really. You get married, if you're lucky, you buy a house, then you have kids, and the house isn't big enough, then the kids go away and the house is too big. Loose fit is a feature of the built environment. But with workplaces, when people are looking a bit more carefully at how much it costs, it becomes a little bit painful when you think, we don't know, but you suspect that it's not being used quite in the way that it was designed. So you might be running a build. So you say, do we need less space? Yeah, maybe. But in the past, how have you analyzed that? You've sort of gone around, or you've done a 2-week study, or you've guessed. And you might persuade them. But if you're going to make a big decision on renewing a lease or not, you need data. So, occupancy data is going to help you make these big decisions, but more subtly, it'll help you configure a building and decide how many spaces, how many desks you need, how many big meeting rooms you need, how many conference facilities, how many seats in the cafeteria. All of those things you can get good answers to. If you simply get historic data of the demand, in other words, how people behave, and put it into an algorithm to tell you the answer. You don't have to, guess anymore. Now, that should be really good news, but people aren't doing it. And there's lots of reasons for that. One is they've gotten used to the loose fit over eons of design. And the other is, it's not kind of our jam. If you are an architect, you don't do data modeling. You don't do Monte Carlo simulations. You've never heard of a digital twin. Well, those days are over, because this is all available. There are people sufficiently nerdy to bring that into the sector, but it's absolutely brand new. The other thing is, this is not only useful for designing a space, but we talked about, you talked about be adaptive. It's also really critical. I think you had an expression about, that was redundant on delivery or something. Outdated on delivery, which is so true. If we take a brief from a client, no matter how good that brief is, and it's usually crap, we will try and improve that brief with the client and work with them. That's called the sort of strategy side of things. And get a half-decent brief. Then we'll go through the design process, and then we'll build it, and then we hand them the keys with an invoice attached, and we walk away. That's the traditional project model. The problem is, because we know secretly that time lag has meant that the business has moved on. It can be a 2-year period, it's not unusual. The building's not suitable anymore, but we get away with it, or have done. I don't think those days are going to carry on into the future when someone can say to you, hang on, mate, you've got AI, you can do better than this. Surely you can use data and give us a better answer so the building's better on day one. And then, when you've been occupying it for, I don't know, 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years, and the business has moved on again because people, you've hired more people, you're doing different stuff, you've got different working patterns. If you can adapt the building because you've got the data that tells you basically how things have changed, then you can perhaps stop someone moving to another or surrendering their lease because that's painful, expensive, risky, etc., and just adapt the building so that it suits the business that's changed, because it will change. They all do. No business stays flat. And what's interesting here is this is not just an architectural problem. I'm not just talking about knocking walls down. I'm actually talking about other things you can do, like change management protocols, like, nobody comes on a Friday. How about giving free beer on a Friday? See if that works. I mean, I'm working with a client now that does that. I don't think it's Fridays. I think it's actually Thursdays they give free beer. It works a treat. So there's using data. There's huge scope for improving the initial design of a building, but also, in my case, workplaces, which is usually part of a building, and adapting it over time. And the last one is user engagement. Employees are a lot more fussy these days because they've got the flexibility and the choice to behave in ways that they couldn't before. You don't get up and go to the office at 9 o'clock, Monday to Friday, and go home at 5 so much anymore. It's not a universal fact of life, but it's very common, as we all know, I think. So the experience that people get when they go to their office or when they use the facilities that are at their disposal require better communication between colleagues, better interaction with the building, which we've seen. We can control the lighting and the ventilation and what have you, and greater knowledge of what's happened in the past. The occupancy, the ability to book space. I heard someone talking about space booking earlier. People don't like booking space. They'd rather just go and find it. Everybody likes a booking app. No, they don't. They'd rather just go to an office and find a desk. And if it's the wrong one, you just go and move. If you book a desk, I guarantee when you go to work, you won't like it. You want to go somewhere else because your mates are over there, or the sun's in your eyes, or something. It's total rubbish. And so there's lots of scope for user engagement, but you need data. And the sort of data that you will put into user engagement routines will be things like occupancy, obviously. An insurance group that we work with has live data of all the floors. You can scroll through the floors on a screen when you walk in. And you can scroll through the floors and say, wow, there's nobody on the 5th floor. I'll go there because I want to be quiet. Or there's nobody on the 5th floor, so I won't go there because I'd rather be hugger-mugger with my mates. That's kind of cool. And you can also see which meeting rooms are vacant, simple things like that. So that's user experience. So for all of this, you need data. Where's the data come from? It comes from sensors of some shape or form. It might be bGrid, it might be something else. But you need sensors. They give you data. You crunch it, spew it out in an app, and annoy people. I just wanted to go back to the concept of the invisible workplace, because this is giving me angst. Because if you look at our website, I recommend you do because it's fabulous, but if you look at our website, it's just pages of, there's largely pictures of projects that we've done, and the photographs are great, and they're highly manicured and perfected and photoshopped, and it's, wow factor is pretty big. Very tough to do that with something you can't see. So it's a bit like, you know, Keynesian economics. It's a great idea, but you can't take a picture of it, but it did change the world. So we got a problem here promoting something that's totally invisible. And I just wanted to make the point that we've had this for a long time. You've seen the laptops, you've seen the mics, you've seen the screens. This invisible workplace has been with us for a while, but it's changing. We're moving into a more virtual world. AI, cloud software, cloud processing, cloud storage, sensors which are there now that weren't there 20 years ago. There's a shift here. And this is the thing that clients are slowly beginning to understand, but they don't know what it can do for them. They haven't been to one of my talks, so they're not quite sure what to ask for. And when I went to the what's it called, CRETEC conference last week, I heard so many developers and building owners say, we keep buying technology without defining why we're doing it. Well, I agree. Don't do that then. Just wait until it's really biting you in the butt before you spend money, because early adopters, suffer usually, and that's a message that I wanted to get across. Early adoption, going full bore into technology that you don't know really why you've got it, is going to be an issue. So I think maybe I wanted to say, decide what the problem is you're trying to solve, and the whole raft of things that you can resolve with technology, maybe you just need one. And one of the things that I really liked that you were saying, Walter, is that you can start with a problem, solve it, but if you're clever, and if you have a platform like a mobile, like a smartphone, that then enables you to add functions, when you find you need them, that's the secret, and it can be done. We've seen today that it can be done. Don't try and boil the ocean, as they used to say in IBM. You don't have to. You can just start small and go bigger when the need arises. So I think for me, that is the biggest thing that I'm learning. I'm not at the sharp end of this. There's a big mountain to climb here. But one thing I've learned is that you don't have to do it all. And I've got a little funny jigsaw thing here because this is supposed to represent the silos that this incredibly fragmented market will present to somebody who's likely to spend money to commission technology. There's a bunch of silos. Silos are misery. They're expensive. They don't talk to each other. And nobody says it's great. I bought all these silos of technology, and I'm so glad I did it. People don't say that. The last thing I'm going to show you is, you'll be relieved to know, is a little diagram, and I threw this in at the last minute because you'll recognize this because it replicates a bit your little stack diagram, and it shook me when I saw that because I hadn't seen it until today. But it's these layers. There's devices. And from this, you get, as I've explained, useless data. So the useless data needs to be contained in a vessel, we'll call that the cloud, in a format that can be used by other applications, third-party applications, not written by us, not written by probably anybody in this room, but they'll say, this is great data. I can look at the environmental conditions and compare that with occupancy, and then I can write a routine that will save you money on driving your HVAC. This is the secret. This is like the data analysis insight train, but in sort of diagrammatic terms. And this is the secret to integrating the horrible fragmented market stuff that's out there. Not everybody will comply with this, because what they want to sell you is a silo, because they've developed it and they've convinced you that it's a good idea, but whether it speaks to other stuff or not is for you to decide. So that's the last, if it's advice, I don't know what it is, but that's a diagram that looks so simple here. It took me about 6 months to get to that. And it does happily map onto the stack that we saw explained earlier. So that's it. That's from a nerdy architect's point of view. I thank you very much. It's almost pub time. We've got a little panel now. Thank you.